So, to be serious, asked the question in my last video about the hard problem of consciousness in regards to what exactly I was getting at when I said that Patricia Churchland is still a dualist of sorts. Um, Now, to explain exactly what I was getting at, we have to read Descartes in two different ways, and there are many ways of reading Descartes, of course, but for my purposes, let's say that there is a way of seeing Descartes in the abstract as just having devised these two conceptual categories, come up with two words, mind and matter, a thinking substance and a material extended substance, and that this way of conceptualizing um, the metaphysical nature of reality has been handed down through philosophy and has been used in many other texts in order to talk about similar things. Now, there's another way of reading Descartes, more of an experiential or psychological reading, where we see Descartes as actually having ushered in this new way of psychologically experiencing oneself in the modern age. Now, maybe Descartes didn't invent this. It was already in the air, so to speak, and he just articulated exactly what this feeling was that was overcoming those people at the leading edge of the evolution of consciousness. And what this new mutation in conscious experience was this I that thinks. We could call it self-consciousness, whereas before most people were just conscious. They still had thoughts, but they weren't aware that they had thoughts. They didn't fully investigate the meaning of the fact that they had thoughts. Descartes really looked into this. He introspected and discovered that essentially he is a thinking thing, and that everything outside his thoughts is just given to him, and that if there is something essentially himself, something that he is responsible for helping to produce, it is his thought process. And this thought process gives him the ability to step outside the material, objective world and gain knowledge of it. Now, there are more steps involved for Descartes, but this is the general psychological mood that allowed science to ever take root. And so someone like Patricia Churchland, while she may want to trash the more abstract conceptual reading of Descartes, the metaphysical reading, she keeps this experiential reading, because all of us today have kept the experiential reading. The ego that we talk about so often is apparent to us because of what Descartes did, or at least partially because of what Descartes did. Certainly others have brought up this fact about the ego and other facts about the ego. But when Churchland says that our problem concerning consciousness is not a problem about the universe, but a problem about our knowledge of the universe, she is there basically saying, I think, therefore I am, and so my being is separate from the being of the world, and in order to gain knowledge, I must somehow gain a representation of this being in my thinking being, I am. And, so this is at a psychological level, at the level of our actual experiences as human beings, or as scientists doing experiments, a Cartesian dualism. And so when I say that she's a dualist, that's what I mean. Now, there's another thing that To Be Serious was confused about, this distinction that Evan Thompson is making between the lived body and the living body. Now, what Thompson is trying to do is get us out of this subject-object ontology, this way of thinking about the relationship between mind and matter that divides them so ultimately from one another. And instead, he brings the body into the picture, which for him is kind of the space between subject and object. And when he talks about the lived body, he's talking not only about our inner subjective experience of thinking, but our inner felt embodiment of what it's like to be a body, not just to be a thinking thing, but to be a body, to be able to move around the world intentionally, to be able to speak, and so forth. So our experience of being within a body, of having sentience of our own from the inside out, is what the lived body refers to. The living body is, from my perspective, other people's bodies that I know are alive. They're living bodies, and I also know they're sentient. They're not zombies. They're not merely objects, but are in fact living bodies. And from my own inner perspective as a lived body, I can also look at myself, though I can never fully objectify myself, just as I can never fully objectify someone else, at least while they're alive. Now, a corpse is different because its life has dissipated, it's left, and all that's left is the object, which used to be a living body. So, again, the lived body is my experience from within as a body capable of doing things in the world and feeling things, and the living body, which is other bodies outside my own inner experience that I also necessarily treat as sentient because their movements affect me before I decide to do it. I don't have a conscious representational um, ability to say, oh, they're conscious or they're not conscious, maybe after the fact, but when I immediately am in someone else's presence, I assume, due to just, mirror neurons, we could say, if we want to give a neurological explanation, that they have inner states of consciousness. So that's the living body. Lived body is from within, my own living experience. Living body is me looking at another body from outside, though as more than an object, but as a sentient being. Thompson is trying to get us to work with this problem because there's still a gap between my lived experience and the living experience of other bodies. But it's not as intractable as the gap between mind and matter as entirely divided ontological categories. So hopefully I've better explained what I was getting at for all of you, but specifically for Karen, for To Be Serious. And yeah, let me know if I clarified. Thanks for listening.